Matthew Bell with Alzheimer'sProof.com, and today I want to talk to you about my top 5, really 6, different herbs for Alzheimer's disease, dementia, cognitive impairment. And I have been going through these. I have 2 other videos. I'll put links in the description. I'll put them up on the screen. But in the first video, I went through 10 herbs that actually have come out of Indian traditional medicine or Ayurveda. And I'll put the list on the screen just to refresh your memory, but we're talking about ashwagandha, brahmi, calamus, cubeb, Indian frankincense, gotu kola, intellect tree, juniper, shankapushpi, and Himalayan spikenard. Now in the next sequence of 10, I dealt with herbs that they weren't able to be classified strictly according to one geographical area. They range from South America to Europe to Asia, but there's no one place that they all came out of, but they just are not quite the top 5, but they are still beneficial according to a lot of articles that are starting to come out on these kinds of things. And the second batch basically was cat's claw, club moss, garlic, ginger, Chinese ginseng, lemon balm, licorice, lesser periwinkle, rhodiola, and sage. In some cases, I was really tempted to put a few of these herbs into my top 5, club moss being the one that just kind of sticks out. It's actually being investigated as a pharmaceutical intervention in its own right. So huperzine A is a pharmaceutical level intervention that comes from the Huperzia serrata, or that is to say from that particular plant, the club moss. So it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff that goes on here. There's a lot of different ways to view these things. I've talked about it in the past, and I don't necessarily want to repeat everything here because this has got a lot of material that I hope to be able to get through. But to just say basically that in some cases you can think of these as alternative medical interventions. In some cases you can think of them just as nutritional supports. So some people have a complementary approach. Some people are really fond of herbs. I think it's very intriguing that you can essentially try in augmenting your diet and including certain things to support your own health in a way that makes it accessible to you, because many of these things, including in my top 5, are available potentially just on your spice rack at home or in your grocery store. I'm actually going to count these down. So the first one I'm going to start with is going to be in the number 5 position. I'm actually going to talk about 2 of them, and I'll explain why here. It was kind of a happy coincidence or a serendipitous thing for me to encounter both of these. But basically these are 2 versions of magnolia. Now, they're very different plants, the 2 plants. The first one is Magnolia officinalis. Now, Magnolia officinalis is the Chinese magnolia tree, also called Magnolia-Bark. This particular plant is native to China. It's very similar in terms of its classification to the Magnolia grandiflora, or southern magnolia, that's found in the southern parts of the United States. No word on whether the southern magnolia is capable of some of the same things as the Magnolia officinalis is, but it may be, it just hasn't been investigated. Essentially, Magnolia officinalis is reputed to be an anti-inflammatory. It has antioxidant properties. It is an anti-anxiety, so it's actually reputed to be an anti-anxiety herb, and so it has sedative properties to it. And you can check out more on one of the websites that I actually featured in my video on the alternative sources for some of this medical information. So there's a guy by the name of Dr. Michael Breas, who runs a website called The Sleep Doctor. He gets into Magnolia officinalis. Interestingly, the Magnolia bark can actually be used in certain gums and dental interventions, so it's actually effective at treating dental problems, for example, gingivitis. It supposedly may help to reduce or inhibit the growth of dental plaques on the teeth. But of course, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for Alzheimer's and dementia, and so the whole purpose of me bringing it to your attention is a separate, further possible use for Magnolia officinalis, and I'll let you read it directly from the journal article that reports it. This is actually from the South Korean-based medical journal Biomolecules and Therapeutics, published out of Seoul. In their volume number 20, published in May of 2012, they wrote the following, that a study revealed that the extract products of Magnolia officinalis were effective for prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Now that's nothing short of unbelievable. They go on to talk about how it has memory improving capabilities, and also it functions as an anti-amyloid kind of chemical. So now you'll remember one of the primary associations with Alzheimer's disease is the aggregation in the brain of various plaques and tangles made out of protein deposits. So there are 2 of these that have been identified. The first is beta amyloid and the second is tau. One of them forms basically on or in the neurons, and the second one forms generally between them. And in this case, the Magnolia officinalis supposedly has the ability to inhibit the production and the growth of these amyloid plaques. But we're not done with Magnolia yet, because it turns out that a second Chinese-based Magnolia plant is actually also effective as an Alzheimer's treatment, according to certain researchers, and that is actually a completely different plant. So the Magnolia officinalis was a tree. This particular one, the Chinese Magnolia vine, is a vine, and it's also better known as the 5-flavored berry or the 5-flavored fruit, and it's used widely in cuisine. This one is termed Schisandra chinensis. So Schisandra chinensis, the magnolia vine, it is widely used in cooking for juices and wines and candies, jams and syrups. It's a flavoring kind of a thing. Some sources even consider it a superfruit. It's supposed to be high in vitamin C, high in vitamin E as well. Herbally, it's considered to be an adaptogenic. An adaptogenic is an herb that supposedly, or a compound that supposedly has the ability to help you in your body regulate different chemicals and different things. So if you're deficient, the adaptogenic can help your body to raise the level back up. If you have an overabundance of something, it can help you to bring the level back down. So the adaptogenic is supposed to be a versatile type of a thing, and the 5-flavored berry is supposed to be one of these adaptogenics. So it figures in with the body's stress response. It's also supposed to be good for liver and stomach ailments. So it's reputed to be it's supposed to have a salubrious effect on the digestive system as well. But again, the main thing here is that it is supposed to have a protective effect on neurons, on brain tissue, and the like of that. Additionally, it's supposed to promote the production in the body of what are called nootropic factors, in particular, brain-derived nootropic factor, or BDNF. Now, it's beyond the scope here for me to get into that, but I have a separate video where I talk about these different nootropic factors and essentially raise the question of whether or not it's within the capacity of some people to actually heal certain cognitive deficits themselves because of the ability inside the body to produce these nootropic factors, of which BDNF is one, and the magnolia vine, or the 5-flavored berry, is supposed to promote the production of that particular factor. All right, next, number 4 is saffron. So saffron, which is the scientific name, is Crocus sativus. It is basically derived from the Iranian area, the Persian area. There is also saffron that is native to Spain, so it's called Spanish saffron. Primarily, saffron is known as a dye or a spice, so you might have it on your spice rack, but if you do, you probably know you do, because it is one of the most expensive spices that are available. Now, just a word of caution, it is not to be confused. The spice saffron is safe to use, it's safe to consume, but it is not to be confused with a deadly plant that's often called the Meadow Saffron. Has other names. It's called the Naked Lady and the Autumn Crocus, and its scientific name is Colchicum autumnale. So Colchicum autumnale is a poisonous plant called sometimes Meadow Saffron. That is not what we have in mind here. We don't have that plant in mind. We have in mind the Crocus sativus, or the regular saffron spice plant that you would find in a grocery store or, again, on your spice rack. Now, the bona fide saffron can be used in all kinds of cooking applications. It can flavor meats like beef and lamb. It can be used sometimes for flavored coffee. It can be used to flavor seafood and stews. It has a wide variety of medical applications from people who are supporters and promoters of saffron use. So it's supposed to be an antidepressant. It's supposed to promote fertility. And in that way, it's similar to one of the other herbs that we mentioned previously, the ginseng. It's supposed to be a cancer fighter, according to some sources. But it's also reputed to have appetite suppressant capabilities, which makes it ideal for certain weight loss applications. So in some cases, it's marketed as a natural weight loss type of supplement. And in that way, it's put in a similar position to Hoodia, or Hoodia gordoni, and also Garcinia cambogia, among other herbs. Sometimes cayenne is used also for that purpose, and also green tea extract is sometimes used for weight loss purposes, or to speed up metabolism. But of course, saffron is also used for Alzheimer's disease interventions. Primarily, saffron is reputed to improve memory, and according to one article, it actually rivaled the pharmaceutical intervention memantine, which is sold under the brand name Namenda, in terms of its effectiveness. Saffron, the herb saffron, was reputed to be as effective as memantine at treating Alzheimer's disease, according to one study that I read. In addition to that, it is an anti-inflammatory, an antioxidant, and it also has anti-amyloid capabilities. That is according to the journal Antioxidants. So some sources are going to summarize these findings by just saying that it has neuroprotective abilities, and that is one way of putting it. And by the way, the study where it was compared with memantine, you can read about that in the journal Human Psychopharmacology, in particular the article titled Comparing the Efficacy and Safety of Crocus sativus with Memantine in Patients with Moderate to Severe Alzheimer's Disease. A double-blind randomized clinical trial is the subtitle, and that was published in 2014. Moving along, number 3, turmeric. Now, turmeric, I love turmeric. It was hard for me to not put turmeric higher on the list, and yet I think that the number 1 and 2 position, the occupants of those positions, I think deserve to be where they are. So I had to bite the bullet and put turmeric down the list, but I love turmeric. Turmeric is fantastic. Turmeric, first of all, is well known as a powerful antioxidant. Interestingly, since we just came from saffron, turmeric is sometimes referred to as the poor man's saffron. It's a member of the ginger family. It comes from India, and it's a feature of Indian dishes. So, for example, curry. Curry is known for having a turmeric content, or curcumin gives it its yellow color, and it's a meat dish with rice and vegetables. So, turmeric can also be used to prepare rice directly or separately. It can be used for stews and soups, and it also can be used, in fact, it's been put into smoothies. Besides being an anti-inflammatory, it also is reputed to have antioxidant properties. Now, very often you'll find turmeric is bundled with black pepper extract, or it's sometimes referred to as bioperin, and that is to help to aid the absorption of the turmeric. Now, the first thing I'm going to point out about turmeric is that in a number of cases when you look, and I have a separate article and also a video on the various hypothetical causes of Alzheimer's disease, so there's no one definite cause that's been decided on. We talked about plaques and tangles. That's often brought up in this discussion. But some people think that Alzheimer's is a chronic inflammation. And so having a powerful antioxidant like turmeric in your repertoire can be a powerful assist to you, particularly if it turns out that Alzheimer's disease is in fact due to chronic inflammation. You're going to need an anti-inflammatory to address it, and turmeric does that. But in addition, and we talked about this with saffron, it also is supposed to promote this BDNF, or this brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So in other words, this BDNF and these neurotrophic factors are supposedly able to help various neurons to recover from damage, repair, even to grow new neural connections or neurons. Additionally, it is sometimes reputed to be a cancer fighter, an anticoagulant, an antidepressant. But what's the most interesting to me, and most direct perhaps of all the things we've mentioned so far, is that according to at least one study, Indians who eat curry scored better on the mini mental state examination, or MMSE test, which is one of the early tests that's administered to help get a fix on whether somebody's declining cognitively. Indians who were regular curry eaters did better on that test than non-curry eaters, which leads some people to believe, number one, that curry, or whatever's in curry, like turmeric, may have a neuroprotective effect and might help people to lower their risk for dementia. Number 2 is rosemary. Now, I stressed about how to order numbers 1 and 2, and I ultimately decided to put rosemary in the second position, but it was a strong contender for number 1, I gotta tell you. So first of all, rosemary, the older name for it is Rosmarinus officinalis. More recently, I think it's been reclassified as a salvia. It's in the same family as sage on that view, this newer view. So it's also called Salvia Rosmarinus. You'll sometimes see that name. It comes from the Mediterranean area, so it prefers a temperate climate, mild climate, full sun, generally dry soil. It is possible to grow it in various areas in the United States. Here's another one that is almost certainly on a kitchen spice rack if you have any of the basic spices, and it's used routinely for cooking. So you might use it to flavor butters, you might use it to flavor different vinegars. It can be used for casseroles, salads, soups, stews, just a lot of stuff. Often it's used for meat and poultry and fish of various kinds. Might be chicken, fish, lamb, pork, and so on. Rosemary also has a reputation as a medicinal herb. It is often prescribed for headaches and for muscle cramping. So in this regard, it has, or it's reputed to have, pain-relieving properties, and this makes it similar in that respect to white willow, to meadowsweet. Muscle cramps are often also treated by guelder rose or cramp bark. It boosts circulation, similar to the number one herb that we're going to look at in just a minute, and it's also considered to be a digestive aid. And once again, more specifically for our purposes presently, it is reputed to help to prevent the aging of the brain. It's supposed to promote memory. Now, here's an interesting little historical anecdote. In Shakespeare's play Hamlet, Ophelia, the character, makes a reference to rosemary being for remembrance. Now, this is debatable what Ophelia means here, or what Shakespeare intended to convey, rather. Some people believe that this is actually a reference to some kind of folk wisdom that was even around at the time of Shakespeare, that rosemary had the ability to enhance memory from a biological or cognitive standpoint. And other people think, no, that's not what it means. It simply means that rosemary is almost like today an olive branch symbolizes peace. Rosemary just symbolized making sure that you commemorated or memorialized the dead person. Regardless, rosemary today is being studied for its potential abilities to improve memory, to improve cognitive function, and to stave off dementia. It's reputed to have a neuroprotective effect and to promote memory. And it's also supposed to protect against the death of nerve cells. And here, the technical term is apoptosis, or the death of a cell. It is also supposed to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine. One of the other hypotheses for the cause of Alzheimer's disease, besides amyloid plaque buildup, and besides inflammation, which we've already discussed, is the breakdown or the deficiency of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. One of the possible interventions that's contemplated on the idea that Alzheimer's may be caused by a deficiency in acetylcholine is to try and give the body a boost in acetylcholine. Now, this could be done by supplementing with acetylcholine directly, but more frequently it's done by trying to prevent the body from breaking down the acetylcholine that it already has. For this purpose, the body uses a chemical called acetylcholinesterase. That is, it breaks down acetylcholine with the chemical called acetylcholinesterase. And so some pharmaceutical and other interventions attempt to block the acetylcholinesterase from breaking down acetylcholine. I have an entire video on this. I'll put the link in the description. I'll put it up on the screen. It's a somewhat difficult concept to follow when you first hear it. At least it was for me. So I went ahead and produced a little explanatory video kind of describing the way in which an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor works. But rosemary, suffice to say, is regarded as a natural acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. The interesting thing about rosemary, again, too, is that it can be absorbed orally. You can take it as a capsule, as an herb, sprinkled on food, or whatever. You could take it as a tea. However, it is also supposed to be absorbed dermally, transdermally, which is to say through the skin, with the skin layer, of course, being the dermis and the outer layer being the epidermis. Rosemary is reputed to be able to penetrate through the dermis. Now, the idea that rosemary is able to inhibit neuronal death or neuron cell death is an idea that's found in the peer-reviewed journal Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and that was in the 2016 volume, in an article literally concentrating on the therapeutic potential of rosemary and the use of rosemary in applications beyond simply capsules and ingested herbs can also be found in the work The Effect of Inhalation of Essential Oil from Rosmarinus officinalis on Scopolamine-Induced Alzheimer's Type Dementia Model Mice, published in 2018 by John Wiley and Sons. Number one is Ginkgo. Ginkgo biloba. So Ginkgo is used actually also in Asian cooking, so it's also used for culinary purposes. The Ginkgo nut is supposed to be slightly sweet in flavor. It's often eaten salted, similar to the way that you might eat sunflower seeds or peanuts or anything like that. It's regarded as an aphrodisiac, which puts it in a similar camp as some of the ginsengs, and I've written about ginseng. But once again, it's also regarded as having medicinal purposes, more straightforward medicinal purposes. So it's supposed to be an anti-inflammatory, and that makes it similar to turmeric in that respect. It's supposed to improve blood circulation. We just looked at rosemary, which also has that reputation to a certain degree, but ginkgo is more well known for that, and it puts it in a similar position as hawthorn. It's also supposed to be an antioxidant. Haven't really talked about the idea that antioxidants might play a role in Alzheimer's, but I've written about it. I talked about it in my video on the possible causes of Alzheimer's disease. One possibility that has been entertained by some researchers is that Alzheimer's might be due to systematic, chronic oxidation of various tissues. And you can think of oxidation the way it affects metals. So rust is oxidized iron. The idea is that your body tissues, they don't rust, but they do undergo chemical changes that can have a negative effect on the body. So the idea is that when your body undergoes these chemical changes, they can release chemicals called free radicals. Antioxidants are a class of chemicals that have the ability, according to this line of thinking, to help rid the body of free radicals. Ginkgo is also prescribed for bladder infections, so presumably it has some kind of antibacterial or antiseptic properties. Now, ginkgo is also supposed to have a positive effect on eyesight, which puts it in a similar position as some of the carotenoid compounds like beta-carotene, lutein. There's an herb called eyebright, which is also supposed to have a similar effect. But mainly, again, it's supposed to improve cognitive function. So for instance, it's supposed to increase memory capacity, it heightens concentration. It's supposed to have a positive effect on energy levels. So once again, similar to ginseng, and this is part of the reason why it is also reputed as something of an aphrodisiac or a vitality enhancer. It's regarded as enhancing mood, which puts it in a similar position as the so-called SAMe or St. John's wort. Now, just to note briefly on the spelling, sometimes it's spelled Gingko and sometimes it's spelled Ginkgo. So just bear that in mind. Google has advanced to the point where, regardless of the one you type in, presumably it's going to return results that are going to be favorable. And in other search engines, like you might type it in on Amazon or you might type it in YouTube, probably going to come up both ways, but you should be mindful of the spelling in case there are search engines that you're trying to use, maybe local search engines for a particular website that aren't as sophisticated. Now, in the book, Natural Standard Medical Conditions Reference, the author, Catherine Albrecht, actually states, quote, "The scientific literature overall does suggest that ginkgo benefits people with early-stage Alzheimer's disease and may be as helpful as acetylcholinesterase inhibitor drugs such as donepezil," and that's, of course, sold as Aricept. So once again, we've got a comparison. Saffron was compared to Namenda or memantine, and here you see ginkgo being compared to donepezil in terms of effectiveness. That's amazing. Another study showed that ginkgo extract was able to raise measures of cognitive function in patients with Alzheimer's disease, and that's according to the Archives of Neurology article, The Efficacy of Ginkgo biloba on Cognitive Function in Alzheimer's Disease. And one of the most interesting things to me was in a book titled New Hope for People with Alzheimer's and Their Caregivers, in which the author Porter Scheimer states that ginkgo is currently the most widely prescribed treatment for Alzheimer's disease and other dementias in Germany. Now, I'm not sure if Mr. Scheimer is talking about treatments of any kind, pharmaceutical level or herbal, or if he's just talking about herbal, but regardless, the point is that there are practitioners in certain areas of the world that regard ginkgo as so potent that it is routinely prescribed for various cognitive dysfunctions and impairments, Alzheimer's being one of the preeminent varieties of that, of course. So in summary, right, we have 20 herbs that I've dealt with in the past, and now these 5, really 6. So number 5, once again, I kind of cheated because I had 2 entries in there, of course, but the first was the Chinese magnolia tree, or Magnolia-Bark, the Magnolia officinalis plant. The second was Schisandra chinensis, or the Chinese magnolia vine, or the 5-flavored berry. That was number 5. Number 4 was saffron, Crocus sativus. Number 3 was turmeric, Curcuma longa. Number 2 was rosemary, variously termed Rosmarinus officinalis or Salvia Rosmarinus. And number 1, ginkgo, which the full name, it's sometimes referred to the full name all the time, Ginkgo biloba. Those are my selections, and one of the things that I wanted to state was that some of the criteria that I used just mentally was, of course, the weight of the evidence, the breadth of the evidence. So rosemary's been talked about for hundreds of years. It's arguable that there were folk medical practitioners going back even to Shakespeare's time and beyond that were aware of rosemary having a potential memory enhancing effect. But in addition to that, I did also want to pay attention to how easy some of these things were to obtain. And with the exception of saffron, which is somewhat expensive, saffron is still available widely, it's simply expensive. The others that I've talked about, for the most part, are available. Now, Chinese magnolia tree, the Magnolia-Bark, that might be a little more exotic, but the 5-flavored berry is available. You've got turmeric, which is widely available, and so is rosemary. You can get them at the grocery store and then stock them on your kitchen spice rack if you want to. Of course, they're available in capsule form. And then ginkgo, again, widely available. Ginkgo nuts are going to be a little bit harder to come by in terms of just a regular grocery store, perhaps, but at health food stores or at specialty stores that deal with some of these foreign food items, you might be able to find that. But in addition to that, ginkgo is very widely available in capsule form. Now, to that point, I did want to just show you a few things, and I'm not necessarily playing favorites here in terms of brands, but you can obtain turmeric as a tea, as I have right here. And this one happens to be from Celebration Herbals, but there are many other varieties, I'm sure. Turmeric is also available in capsule form, and once again, here I have Nature's Bounty. Many brands available. One thing about capsules, there's a difference between standardized and non-standardized extracts. Some of the critics of herbal supplements are going to point out that there aren't the kinds of constraints and restrictions on manufacturers who produce these supplements. And there's a certain degree of truth to this, so you do want to be careful to use a reputable supplier. And you want to be careful because they do have potency. So it's not perhaps ordinary for a person, say, to be allergic to one of these, but I wouldn't rule it out. So you do want to at least consult with some kind of health professional before you embark on a systematic routine of using these things. And once again, none of the information here is for diagnostic or therapeutic purposes. I'm not giving you recommendations or advice in terms of medical advice. This video is simply for general informational purposes. I'm not a medical researcher. I'm not a medical doctor. So if you need personalized recommendations, you need to consult with a healthcare professional in your area. But finally, some of these things can be available in terms of, again, kitchen spice racks. So this one here, Spice Islands, some turmeric that was just gotten from a spice rack. Some of them, like turmeric, are going to be widely available in a number of formats. Others, and here I have Ginkgo. Ginkgo is probably, like I said, going to be mostly available as a capsule. And once again, here I have it through the brand Solar Ray. Ginkgo leaf extract. Here's rosemary. Rosemary is also one of these that's widely available as a kitchen spice in your spice rack. It's also available as a tea. You can make what's called a hot infusion. You could take some of the rosemary, you could put it into a little coffee filter, tie it off with a little twisty tie that you might find on the end of a bread bag. You would boil some water, probably enough for a cup or 2 cups, whatever you felt like you were able to drink. Then once the water was boiling, you would turn the boiling water off the heat. You could then set the coffee filter inside, let it sit there and steep for maybe 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Different people are going to recommend different amounts. Then, of course, you would carefully remove the tea bag. You could squeeze it, probably not by hand. You're going to want to press it because obviously it's just previously boiling, so it might be very hot, so don't burn yourself. But once you remove the tea bag, then you would just allow the tea to cool to your personal preference. You could possibly sweeten it with honey or stevia or whatever you prefer to your taste, and then you could drink the rosemary tea that way. You can also find rosemary in various shampoos. Saffron, again, you're going to find in the spice rack. It's often sold as a weight loss supplement, so you can be aware of that. Now, you want to make sure if you're getting it as a weight loss supplement or if you're bundling, if you find these supplements bundled with other things, you want to make sure you know what you're getting. In this case, with this saffrotone, it looks like the saffron is the primary and only constituent except for certain preservatives and things like this. So it is possible to find saffron both as a capsule or in your spice rack, and I'm just simply showing these for illustrative purposes. I don't have any magnolia to show you, but once again, I'm sure it's obtainable through specialty food stores and the like of that. If you found something of use in this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be alerted to new content as it becomes available. I thank you so much for being with me today, and I look forward to seeing you again in another video. Thank you so much.